Eddie Hearn, a spicy little face-off there, and plenty of action Saturday night.
Yeah, loads. It's such a good night of boxing. I mean, of course, we know it's Cambosos, and I love the fight against Jake Wiley. I've got to be honest. I think the Jordan fight was a good fight, but it's just hard, when you've got a guy who doesn't speak English, who's sort of coming over, and now all of a sudden you've got an Australian who just seems to just disrespected George a little bit. That he's got his back up, and Wiley can fight. George is right. He's never boxed at those levels before. And it's a bit like Sky and Tiara. Tiara's never boxed at those levels before, but she's very good. Do you know what I mean? It's very dangerous. And I actually think we're going to get real fireworks in Cambosos Wiley. I think it's going to be a lot of drama. I don't just think it's going to be George going out there and destroying him. They fancy it big time.
I did say at the press conference, and it was a hard one to put to him face to face because I didn't want to shit him. But I did say, is it all over?
It has to, I can't speak on George's career like that, but for me, yes. I can't, if we're talking about Cambosos fighting Richardson Hitchens, we're talking about all this big potential. The reality is, if you lose to Jake Wiley, and this is why a lot of fighters don't like fighting domestic opposition. George said there's a difference between Australian titles and fighting me. Well, if you get beat by the Australian champion, how can you talk about world level? And your question was right. I mean, that is the reality. Win, fight for the world title. Lose, retire. And in a sense, if you're talking about sound bites, Cambosos is fighting for his career on Saturday night. That's the reality.
Yeah, I guess you don't want to be the undisputed at 135 and then muscle up in an RSL.
Yeah, but that's that's the way it goes. Is in boxing is a brutal game. Yeah. And one defeat and Wiley, you know about the steel of this kid. Imagine. Like I said, when I joked about the purse, that wasn't a joke. He would have taken no money for this fight because he thinks he can win. And he knows if I beat Cambosos, I've cracked it, I've had it off, Yeah,
well, obviously the Australian landscape, you're looking to invest more and more time into it. I've heard you say a bunch of fights this year. Who else do you want to sort of see out here? How do you want to, obviously, I don't know, what if George doesn't get Hitchenson's but it's looking like that though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But look, I think we can bring big fights here. I think at the end of the day, obviously, we've got the likes of Jai Opetaia, Justice Huni, Connor Wallace, and then on this card, Tara Moana, Sky Nicholson, George Kambosos. We've got so much Australian talent. We're looking to be back here in May. Could be an announcement this week for Jai Opetaia, and that will be 3 shows for us in 5 months. That would be a nice, nice involvement. I look to do 5 or 6 here this year, but in time, with the Zone and the Foxtel stuff, we'd like to be up to a dozen shows here and have a real chance to push Australian boxing forward.
You speak about Jai, obviously, that he should be a national name, even though he's not, and I totally agree with you. When the opportunities are there to not be in Saudi Arabia, do you not find that it might have been good to get him out of the Gold Coast and maybe move him to Sydney or move him to Melbourne or Brisbane, obviously the same thing?
But it's difficult when, when you can sell a certain amount. We know we did 4,500, 5,000 last time at the Gold Coast. It was wild. It was brilliant. So you kind of know going back there, with Connor Wallace, with Max, with all those guys, you're going to sell it out again. We should have the same kind of number here on Saturday, but it's not easy. You don't just do 7,000 or 8,000. Even Tim Zhu up in Newcastle. How many are you going to sell? Do you do 8,000 or 9,000? Do you really? Australian boxing is not really in that position until you bring a big name like a Haney or like a Lomachenko or like a Pacquiao. Then you're going to do the 20s and 30s and 40s. But we've got to keep the flow of boxing going here. And when I look at this fight card and I think if this fight card was in the UK, we'd be doing 10,000, easy. It's a big night. Do you know what I mean? But you've got to keep pushing. You've got to keep pushing. And too often, people are like, oh, how many that sell? How many that sell? Just get behind it. Do you know what I mean? You've got to keep pushing and again, delivering value for money. And I think this fight card delivers tremendous value for money on the Zone, no pay-per-view, which is important as well. What was Tim Zhu against, Keith Thurman against
Brock Jarvis?
$80 or something? $80 US dollars? Aussie dollars?
Yes.
It's a lot of money. $70, 50 US or 45 US. That's a lot of money. So we need to make it accessible, and that's what we're trying to do.
One thing I noticed this week, and I was had to triple check it, number 1 on the WBO is Justice Huni.
Yeah. I'll be honest, our job is to push those guys with the governing bodies. What it is when you're active and you continuously win, even though he's been fighting below that World 15 level, you just keep ticking up, and one or two lose, and then before you know it, he's now in a position where he could become mandatory for Joseph Parker. for the interim world title. Like, that is, you know, Huni against Parker is a big fight in this region, and I love that fight as well. Do you know what I mean? And you know, it's going to be a really interesting time now with Justice, because we just reversed a little bit and we gave him those 3 quick fights, and now, like, as WBO #1, in a way, you kind of need to, you know, make a statement and have that kind of fight, and you know, we need to get him that big fight.
I don't know if you've seen Parker's boy band skit,
brilliant.
but
Absolutely brilliant. I mean, he is. Listen, I love Joe personally. I love Joe as a fighter, and when he does that is just Joe. Do you know what I mean? And he's a great character.
do you think that gets Usyk over the line, or do you maybe see that mandatory WBO
I'm not sure
happen?
whether the Usyk fight will happen. You know, to be honest with you, I'd like to see Parker fight Dubois. You know, that fight was signed. Obviously, Parker pulled out 24 hours. Dubois pulled out 24 hours before. Let him go. It's a brilliant fight.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to Saturday night. That's going to be a brilliant fight. DAZN, you can grab it. There'll be a link in the description for you to do that. Eddie Hearn, welcome. Is this your, like, you've done a lot? Yeah, I was thinking
I've been to Brisbane a couple of times for our shows. So, first time in Sydney. Had a little stroll around yesterday. I'm going surfing this afternoon.
Where?
In the Olympic Park, you know.
Oh, yeah, it's just, yeah, okay.
I think they're going to film it. Wait till you see it.
I'm
It
coming.
ain't going to be pretty.
That's unreal. Now there's, we've got the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, and Eddie Hearn, 3 icons
There
in
you
the
go,
one
mate.
city.
Oh, well done. Well, I love that. I love
just
that.
a little drive-by on the way out. Charlie Parsons, haven't seen him. You're firing.
Good. Not here. We wanted to take this event seriously. So no Charlie Parsons.
Great. So I'll pitch you my resume. I can do the
Got it,
Aussie
mate.
stuff.
You
There we
can
go.
be the Aussie Charlie Parsons.
Yes, you heard it.